Hey, friend. Hey, Quickster. I have to say, Quickster. Hey, Quickster. Glad you're here. I'm Susie, along with my co host, James. How are you, James?
I'm fantastic. How are you today, Susie?
I'm amazing. I know that you have a topic for us to talk about. So
Yeah,
lay it on
yeah.
me.
This week I was chatting with an individual who came by my office and had asked me for some feedback on something on a presentation they had just given, and it was really uh, a casual response was, "Hey, how'd I do on that presentation?" And it struck me that that person had been in my office once a week for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And every time he comes in, it's kind of the same top. It's kind of the same thing. How did I do? How did I do that? How did And I realized that he is somebody who's just constantly seeking approval and
Oh,
looking
interesting.
for that kind of constant reassurance. And so the next time I saw him, I sat down with him and I said, "Let's talk a little bit about that as a leader and how you perform and behave. And are there drivers that are ultimately holding you back simply because all you're really looking for is that constant approval?" And it was a
Huh.
very emotional discussion, and it was kind of heartfelt in the sense that he was aware that he needed that, but wasn't really aware that he was actually actively seeking it. So I thought it'd be worth discussing
Interesting.
today about how to address the fact that so many of us do constantly need some sort of approval,
Yeah.
and the ways that we can both address that to ensure that we're successful and feeling like we're doing a good job, but without it undermining our performance and our perception.
Yeah. And perception is key there. And also, does he need it from just you? Is it because of your position in the organization, or do you think it's general from all
Great
over?
question. It's certainly from authority figures in his particular case.
Mm. Okay.
And I don't know that it is like direct line management exclusively, but we did talk about it being a broader issue for him. And he was quick to point out that, yeah, I go down, I go by Rachel's office once a month and I do the same thing. And so interesting epiphany, if nothing else,
Huh.
but the realization, it opened a great dialogue.
All right. I have to ask one more question. Is he open to like constructive criticism too? Is he only looking for the recognition or the accolades?
That was a great question. That is a great question, and that really was something that went through my mind before I went back and chatted with him separately. Because ultimately, I think that I've seen more junior people who are simply asking for the "how'd you do?" When you get off stage or
Yeah.
after you give a presentation, it's that knee jerk, "Hey, how'd I do? You did great." End of discussion.
Good.
That's not really
Yeah.
looking for growth. That's just looking for a little bit of a pat on the butt. And so I had to think through: is he the kind of leader who is looking for growth? And in his case, yeah, I think that he is somebody who is truly trying to be better, but perhaps doesn't have the mechanism to effectively grow in this space.
Awesome. Well, all right. So tell us what advice would you give to others who
I
need
think
this?
that maybe another caveat, though, is I think that we all, as leaders, tend to be successful because we do seek that approval. And,
Huh.
type A's,
Yeah.
firstborns, people who succeed because of their traumas, whatever it ends up being, we are hungry for that. And I think the first piece of advice I'll
Hmm.
give is that, put a name to that. Acknowledge the fact that a lot of your drivers are intended to get that type of positive feedback. And when you can
Hmm.
put a name to that, when you can acknowledge it and accept the fact that you do certain things that may be simply intended to get that kind of feedback, you can be more constructive about it. And I think that so often recognizing that you have a problem, if you will, is the first step
Yeah.
in dealing with it. But I think in this case, recognizing that some of your behaviors have a very specific intended consequence, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, allows you to leverage that or take advantage of it, or at least address it in a much more constructive way.
Yeah. That's good. Um, yeah, because that you're right. That's the first idea to figure out what you will need down the road and
Right.
how much you need. All right.
Right.
So what's number two?
Well, and I think the second one is create an ecosystem in which you can generally get constructive feedback. We've done a couple episodes on constructive feedback and the ways that you can go about doing that. But it's back to that example of that, after you've done that high school presentation, and you get off the stage and somebody says, "Good job." That's feedback, right? Is it constructive feedback? No. And I think,
Mm-mm.
when you truly ask for constructive feedback, you engage with people, ask pointed questions, that
Mm-hmm.
can give you that sense of approval. That can feed that need that you have,
Mm-hmm.
but it also is a much more powerful way for you to grow as a leader and engage your peers. So you're really doing double duty on something that is super important as a leader.
Yeah, I love it. Such good advice and very timely too, this time of year.
Yeah.
So what's the third?
No, I think the third one is really, you need to um, build the internal um, means to give yourself the accolades. Right, you have to become your own best
Mm-hmm.
advocate. This is the core of the phrase. It's lonely at the top, and that we each have to behave in a certain way that ultimately we know that what we did was
Yeah.
good, and that we can give ourselves that approval. Now, it is easy to live in a bubble, and to gaslight yourself, and think that you're doing a great job. But at the end of the day, we have to accept the fact that if we are somebody who needs approval, we're going to have to get that from lots of different places, and sometimes it has to come from inside. And as leaders,
Yeah.
you may not get the straight feedback. You may not get the approval or the accolade or the recognition that you deserve. But you have to give that to yourself, and realize that 9 times out of 10 you are your own worst critic, and giving yourself the agency to acknowledge the work that you did, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, and one kind of way to do that when you were talking that I thought of is if you can write down some of the things that people say about you, your strengths, because sometimes people have a more positive view of yourself because we're hard can be hard on ourselves. Go back to those things and reread them instead of looking to ask people to pull these in, and start to understand what those strengths are that you have, because you're taking the voice of somebody else, you're trying to incorporate that, or you're saying, okay, this is truth about me, and then get yourself to really believe that.
I love that. I think that's such great advice, because as humans, we tend to remember either the bad, really bad, or the really good.
Hmm.
And I think we're wired to think and remember only good, but as leaders, and when
Yeah.
we're self-reflecting, we only remember the bad. And so, you'll long remember that meeting that you had, broccoli on your teeth, but you won't remember the 14 great things that came out of that meeting. And so we tend to be critical of
Yeah,
ourselves. And so, as we are finding
totally.
ways to give ourselves the credit, having stuff written down, and reminding yourself of the positive things that you bring to the table, I think that's just good advice.
Yeah. Okay, that was good. So what go bring it back to us for us. Give
Yeah,
us
I
the
think
three.
that, in a world in which we are all challenged to work with people that constantly seek, that recognition, or we seek our own a constant sort of approval. There's three ways. First, develop the self-awareness that is something that you need. Realize that you may behave in a way that seeks that out. Secondly, find ways to constructively create patterns and behaviors with your team, so you are getting that feedback. Create an ecosystem of constructive feedback, and you'll find that you get that feedback better. And then third, really learn to give yourself the positive feedback. Patting yourself on the back is not a horrible thing, especially as an executive, where you're not going to have a lot of people around you who may recognize you for the hard and plumbing level work that you end up doing. If you're dealing with the unsexy parts of the business, give yourself agency to recognize that on your own.
This was great. I'm so glad that he came down the hall and asked
Yeah,
those questions so that you could give this wisdom to us. Thank you, James.
that was a great topic.